This is part one in a series about how to change. Two quick things before we get going. Number one, this series is biblical, but it's not a Bible study. We're going to look at a lot of principles that you'll find in the Bible, the biblical principles, but it's not a, hey, let's go through chapter after chapter, verse after verse. My next series will probably be that way, but I wanted you to know what to expect. Second, if you've been around me for a while, you may have heard some of the content in this series, some of the illustrations for sure, but I believe that God led me to bring it up now. So here we go. We're going to talk about how to make long-lasting, healthy life change. Timothy Lane and Paul Tripp wrote, nothing is more obvious than the need for change, right? You look at your life, you look at my life, you're like, yeah, you need to change, buddy, right? So nothing is more obvious than the need for change, but nothing is less obvious than what needs to change and how change happens. I mean, think about just that part, what needs to change, right? Is it my circumstances? Will everything be better? Will everything unravel itself? All the other problems I've got, will it kind of come together if my circumstances change? Is it my self-concept that needs to change? Is it my self-awareness needs to change? Like I got to get rid of some blind spots. Is it my environment that needs to change? Is it my friend group that needs to change? I need some better friends. Is it my habits that need to change? Is that the problem? I just keep doing the same thing habitually and I don't even think about it anymore. Is that the problem? If I fix that, will create the change that needs to happen. Is it my heart that needs to change? Is it my assumptions? Is it my perspective? What if it's none of those things? What needs to change? You can see that we need help if we're going to make the kind of change that we want, that long-lasting, truly life-giving, healthy change, not just trading one problem for another. So what do? Well, let's take the focus off us for just a second and talk about God's role in this. God's interactions with us seem to follow a pattern. We call it the needs circle. This is not original with me. You can see where I got this concept and diagram from. But it starts at the very top and it goes around in a circle, hence we call it the needs circle. So it starts at the top with the needs of the individual and it goes like this. God looks down at me and he sees what's going on in my life. He knows me intimately and he knows what I really need. God does the same thing with you, right? He looks at you and he is driven to act based on the needs that he sees in your life. So those needs that God sees, then God uses and God determines some experiences for me to go through. Those experiences often, more times than not, are not pleasant and so they create tension in my life. Now that's not punishment, it's God trying to meet a need in my life. So that tension is created to lead me to examination, right? So you see on the diagram, the tension demands examination. I'm supposed to pause and say, all right, God, what are you trying to teach me? Or God, what do I need to change? Or God, why do I keep going through these same kinds of experiences over and over again? Or God, is there something I need to know here, right? That's the examination phase. That's not the end. Examination requires then me to come to some conclusions, some decisions like, okay, this is what's going on. This is what God wants. This is the change that God's trying to make in me. Not done yet. Those conclusions, those decisions, in order to land a change, they require a plan. They require some application, right? I have to come up with a plan. I have to put some things in practice. But then if I apply that, if I follow the plan, that results in change. And praise God, that need has now been met. And that allows God to begin to work on a new problem, a new need that I have in my life. Let me give you an illustration to kind of flesh this out. Let's imagine that there's a young man who has just some real issues with authority, right? And he just can't let anyone tell him what to do anymore, it seems. And he's already quit a couple of his jobs because, he didn't like his boss and stuff. So he quit that. And as you talk to him, you can already see that this is going to be a problem for him, right? He's already got resentment. He thinks that, everybody's a jerk and they're out to get him. It's led him to some bad behavior, in addition to quitting some jobs, right? He just had a negative attitude. That's rubbed off on some other people. And not only that, it's jeopardizing his future. Let's say that this young man has tremendous leadership gifts. He could be a great leader in the future, but you know what I know. In order to be someone who can be trusted with authority, you have to have already learned how to live under authority. And he's not doing that. And so because he has not learned how to live under authority, he could never be trusted with authority. He's not learning the lesson. So as you look at his life, I mean, this is a huge deal. It's messing with his present. It's already corrupted his past. And his future, as God has designed it, is in jeopardy. And so this is the need, right? He needs to learn how to respond appropriately, biblically, in a Christ-honoring way to authority. And so God decides, all right, this is what we're going to work on with this young man. I'm going to take you around the needs circle, and I'm going to help meet this deep need in your life that's messed up your past, you're messing with your present, and will jeopardize your future. So what is God going to do? God is going to bring some experiences into this young man's life that'll be probably painful. Most likely, he's going to end up being under the authority of someone, again, who is difficult to deal with. Maybe someone who's hard to respect or isn't always fair or whatever. Now, quick time out. When God does that, I don't believe that God is like making his boss become a jerk. But I do believe that our God loves us so much that he will twist and turn the sins and the habits of others and bring that into our life in a way to get our attention in order to take us around the need circle. So I don't think God's making his boss a jerk, but God will use the fact that his boss is a jerk to help meet this need in this young man's life. So, all right, so he gets a boss. The boss is a jerk. That creates some tension in his life. The purpose of that is to cause examination for him to go, why, God, what's going on? This is like the third job in a row that I've had with a boss. It's just hard to do, right? God, are you trying to teach me something? Is there something I need to know? That's the purpose, examination, which will then lead to some conclusions. Like, you know what? The common denominator here is me. I always thought the common denominator was, every boss in the world is a jerk, but, other people seem to be okay with their bosses, or at least some of them. Maybe that's the conclusion, or something like that, some conclusion. And then that requires some application. He needs to come up with a plan. Okay, I'm going to search the scriptures. I'm going to talk to some others. I want to get some really good advice. Like, how do you deal with an authority figure in your life that you just don't trust or you don't respect, right? That kind of a plan. Then apply the plan, put the things into practice that you learn or get taught. That will lead to change, and that need will be met. And then God can work on a different need in this young man's life, helping him live the kind of life that God has for him and become the leader that he could be, right? You got the idea. Now, here's my question. I've shown you the circle. Is that how it usually works? I mean, yeah, at the top, God brings the needs in, yep, or sees the need, yep, that's for most people. Does God then bring experiences and circumstances? Yep, most people get that far around the circle. What about the next part, the tension? Yep, get there. What about the next part, the examination and then the conclusions? Is that how it works? Does most people go all the way around the circle? No, right? I don't think so. My observation is, after looking at my life and listening to a bunch of other people who are good people, well-meaning people, but as I look at them, here's what I see a lot in me and them. Seeking relief, most people jump off the circle. They view the tension as the problem, and the need is to get out of the tension, right, and get some relief. So they jump off the circle. They find a way out. Like in our example of the young man, what would he do? Well, he's got another boss who's a jerk. So what's he do? Quits his job, or says something, and tries to put that boss in his place, or he tries to get other people to all take his side or something, right? But it jumps off the circle. He tries to get out of the tension because the tension in his mind is the problem and that needs to be taken care of. But think about that for just a moment. Since God is a loving Father and the need is still unmet, what is God going to do? Well, God is going to meet that need, whether that young man wants him to meet that need or not. He's a loving father. He's not a genie who does what the young man wants. He's a father who does what's best for the young man, right? So God is going to bring some new experiences into the life of that young man, which are designed to produce that examination, conclusions, application, and change, and meet the need. God is committed to meeting the need. So where on the circle diagram does the young man go once he jumps off? Well, right back up to the top, right? Because the need's still there, and God is still there and involved. There's a camp song. I use that very loosely when I say that song. And it's one of those repeat things. So, the leader says, way down south, not so very far off. And then the crowd echoes back, way down south, not so very far off. A blue jay died of a whooping cough. Blue jay died of a whooping cough. He whooped all day and he whooped all night. He whooped all day and he whooped all night. He whooped his head and tail right off. He whooped his head and tail right off. Now, if I was leading the song, when I get to the end of that, I say these words. Same song, second verse, a little bit louder and a little bit worse. And now as I say it, it's going to be a little bit louder, but I'm going to start to slur my speech a little bit. So it's like, way down south, not so very far off. A blue jay died of a whooping cough. He whooped all day and he whooped all night. He whooped his head and tail right off. And then usually when I'm doing this, I do it like 5 times. By the time you get to the 5th verse, it's like terrible. It's almost unintelligible. It's like this. Same song, laugh first, whole lot louder, whole lot worse. He whooped all day, he whooped all night, he whooped all day. And everybody thinks it's funny and laughs, and I lose my voice, which I'm in danger of doing right now. Now, that's a lot like what happens with the circle diagram when we jump off, right? We go back up the top, same song, second verse, or third verse, or fourth verse, or fifth verse, right? A little bit louder, a little bit worse. Now, as you stop and you think about the example I gave, and you're looking at the diagram there, perhaps, you might be thinking, you know what? This diagram explains a lot. Like maybe you see it in someone's life. As I was giving the example, and you're thinking like about somebody who just keeps going through the same stuff over and over and over and over. Same song, 43rd verse, a little bit louder, a little bit worse. Like maybe you're not thinking about someone else. Maybe you're just like, this diagram explains a lot, like me. Like, God, I don't know what you're trying to teach me, but I'm pretty sure this is like the 7th verse. God doesn't always use the circle, like as in use pain to get our attention, but he may, and he does frequently. And like I said, you may have seen it in someone else's life. You may see it in your own life. But this I know, the top part, God is always doing that. God is always looking at me, always looking at you, and addressing the deep needs that he sees in us. Because here's the thing that just blows me away when I think about God. He loves us as we are, and he refuses to leave us as we are. Right? He loves me just like I am, just as I am, just as you are. He loves us as we are, but as a perfect father and a perfect friend. He doesn't just let us live in our dysfunctions forever. No. He loves us as we are, but he refuses to leave us as we are. He is absolutely committed to meeting our needs, far, far more committed to meeting our needs than we are committed to meeting our own needs. Which leads to the big thing that I want us to take away from part 1. Truly healthy and life-giving change starts with God, right? God determines what needs to be changed. That's what I mean by starts with God. God's at the top of the circle. God is at the top of the process of you and me making the kinds of changes that we really need to make. God determines what needs to be changed, and on our best days, what we do is we cooperate fully with the changes that God wants to make in us. Does that make sense? I think it does. Truly healthy and life-giving change starts with God. And know this, God is never nitpicky when he figures out what needs to be changed. He's never like looking at me or looking at you and going, you know what, that just really annoys me. you're going to change that. I'm going to bring experiences in your life that are causing you all kinds of pain because I want you to fix that little thing because that's so irritating. God is not nitpicky when he picks what needs to be changed, nor is God shallow. By shallow, I mean goes after things that aren't really all that big of a deal and aren't going to make a big difference. No, it's the exact opposite. God addresses our deep, our foundational issues when he picks what needs to be changed. He goes after the life-dominating stuff. Life-dominating, as in, like I've already indicated, it's already messed with our past. It's interfering with the future that we ought to have, that maybe even we want to have, and it's jeopardizing our future for sure. It's stuff that affects several areas of our life. Maybe it affects our family life. Maybe it affects our finances and our physical health and our mental health, right? And our friendships. That's what I mean. It's life dominating. It's messing with life, not just a little section of life. When God picks what needs to be changed, that's the kind of stuff that he goes after. He goes after those issues that will bring substantial healing and remarkable freedom if they get addressed. Let me show you an example in the Bible, and then I'll give you an example from my own life. Luke chapter 12, verse 13, someone from the crowd came to him, that's Jesus, and said, "Teacher, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me." So a guy receives an inheritance, the other brother doesn't get any of it, and so the guy who doesn't get any of it comes to Jesus and says, "Hey, tell him he's got to share with me." Now I'm going to give this guy who came the benefit of the doubt and assume that he has a need, right? And so now that need could be a legitimate need, like he's got bills to pay, and so getting some inheritance would really help. Or it could just be a felt need, such as justice, like, "Hey, this isn't fair. Tell him to give me some of the inheritance because it's not fair that he gets it all," right? Jesus addressed the man, but now there's a crowd watching and listening. So in verse 15, he includes them in the answer. But watch what Jesus does. He then told them, "Watch out and be on your guard against all greed, because one's life is not in the abundance of his possessions." Like I said, I'm assuming the man had a need, but Jesus is going to go after the deeper need, the foundational need. Do you see it? What's the deep foundational need that Jesus is addressing in this man and in the crowd, by the way? Some kind of a false belief that life is found in the abundance of possessions. Like somehow, this is what life is. Life consists of what you have. And if you don't have much, then you don't have much life. But if you have a lot of possessions, you'll have a lot of life. And life can only be great if you have the stuff. That's the issue that Jesus says, this is the one that's messed with your past, is messing with your present, right? You're already going, "My brother's a jerk," right? It's messing with you, right? You're getting some bitterness and resentment. It's hurting your relationship in the present. And it's certainly going to mess your future up if you keep pursuing a course of life, young man, where you believe that life is all about stuff. That's going to mess with you. It's going to mess with your family. It's going to mess up your friendships, right? Jesus goes after in this story that deep foundational need, because that's the one that will produce the most healing and the most freedom. God is doing this in my life over the last 18 months or so. God has made it very clear to me that I have an issue. I call it the scarcity mentality. It's this belief that there's never going to be enough blank. I'll never have enough, so therefore I have to do something. And God has helped me to see that this doesn't just apply to money, right? So the sentence could go like this: there'll never be enough money, Andy, so you're going to have to save or go without or obligate God. And it pains me to say I've done all of that, right? I've believed wholeheartedly there's never going to be enough money, so I've saved on many occasions, and then when I have the money saved up for the thing that we need, then not spend it, or felt tremendous anxiety over spending it, because now we might end up in a spot where we don't have the money, now what are we going to do? There are times when I've gone without. There are times when I've made my family go without because of anxiety and this belief that there's never going to be enough money to go around. There have been times when I've tried to make deals with God, like obligate God, like, "God, I'm doing what you want. Now you need to do what I want, because I don't have enough money and I can't, and you've got to, but it hasn't stayed with money, as I already said. The scarcity mentality spread to other areas of life. For example, approval. I realized a while ago that I believe there's never going to be enough praise to go around, so you're going to have to compete for it. I think I picked this up in my childhood. I saw this modeled and I adopted it. And guys, you don't need a lot of imagination to think about how that has messed with my past, how it has hurt me and turned me into an approval addict, but it's also hurt the people that I was competing with in order to get praise, right? Because there were times when I put them down, or things like that. You've got the idea. It's also this mentality, this scarcity mentality, this idea, this belief, really, conviction, should we go that far, that there's never going to be enough. That spread to the idea of, or to the issue of treats. It's one of the reasons why it's hard for me to not overindulge. Growing up, we had so very little. And so when I have a chance, like, to eat food that I really like, it's very hard to eat just one, because I don't know when I'll get that treat again. And so I have a tendency to overindulge. And so God, in his mercy and his love, looked at me and was like, Andy, you have huge issue. You have this scarcity mentality, and I want to meet that need. I want to help you see what that's doing to you. But I also want to replace that with an abundance mentality so that you are free to give and free to enjoy and free to love, right? And that kind of a thing. So God's been going after that. And I got to tell you, there have been ways that God's gone after that, and he's just kind of like convicted me, and I'm like, oh. But there are other ways where God's brought experiences in my life that have caused tremendous tension. And even though I know what I now need to do, it's taken brave practice as my plan to work at going around the circle, at cooperating with God as he seeks to meet that need in my life. I listed a few examples of foundational needs. Let me throw out a few more. If someone was relationally disconnected, that would be the kind of need that God would want to address, and we'd go after. He'd bring them, take them around the need circle. If they were deceived about something major, maybe they believe that they have some need that they something they don't really need, God would address that. If they believed that they were victims, and maybe they are victims, but they're also guilty victims, and so they're not seeing the ways that they are contributing to this, that would be a need that God would address, perhaps through the need circle. If they have become idolatrous. They've taken something and it's a good thing, but they've made it, like, given it so much value, they've made it an ultimate thing, and are becoming enslaved by that, and maybe using others to try to get that thing or whatever. That would be a need that God would meet by taking them around the circle. If they are deeply wounded, that would be a need that God would want to meet. The big one that everybody has, at least at the beginning, is if we're spiritually dead. Like, we have no responsiveness to God in a warm way. If we're not saved, we would call it, you could use that term. That's a need that God would want to meet, right? He'd bring circumstances, experiences in our life to get our attention. And those circumstances will often, they're painful. They create tension. And the desire of God is that we will look at it and go, God, where are you, and what are you trying to do? And we'll come to the conclusion that we need God. We need him to be our forgiver. We need him to be our friend, and we need him to be our leader. And so we cry out to him and say, God, I ask you to be just that, and I trust that you will do that because Jesus said you will, and Jesus died for me. And then God meets that need, and he's free to meet other needs. Now, I want to leave all that aside for just a moment and go off on a little bit of an aside. Something I've experienced, perhaps you've experienced too, is this. Sometimes you become very much aware of something that needs to change. Like, maybe it's a bad habit or something like that. And you become very much aware, like, this needs to change. And so you try to change, and you cry out to God, and you're like, God, help me. So you're praying, God, help me change. Maybe it's like even more than that, like desperate prayers. God, help me to change. And then, though it seems like God doesn't seem to help you change, or at least not help you very much, what gives with that. I want to talk about that. C.S. Lewis, in his book Mere Christianity, was describing this exact scenario. And in his scenario, he's addressing the issue of somebody who wants perfect chastity or perfect purity. It's somebody who wants to, like maybe in our day circumstances, they don't want to ever look at porn again. They realize that's messing with the past, it's dishonoring God in the present and putting a lot of temptation on them, and it'll mess with the future. So they don't want to do that anymore. They want perfect chastity, perfect purity. This is what C.S. Lewis wrote. He said, "We may indeed be sure that perfect chastity, like perfect charity, will not be attained by any merely human efforts. You must ask for God's help." Yeah, we know that. "Even when you've done so, it may seem to you for a long time that no help or less help than you need is being given. Never mind. After each failure, ask forgiveness, pick yourself up, and try again. Very often, what God first helps us towards is not the virtue itself, but just this power of always trying again. For however important chastity or courage or truthfulness or any virtue may be, this process trains us in habits of the soul which are more important still. It cures our illusions about ourselves and teaches us to depend on God. We learn on the one hand that we cannot trust ourselves even in our best moments, and on the other hand, we need not despair even in our worst, for our failures are forgiven. The only fatal thing is to sit down content with anything less than perfection." What C.S. Lewis is saying is sometimes you want to change, and God would agree, this is the thing that needs to change, like especially if it's a sinful habit. But God loves us so much that He goes after the deep stuff. And the deep thing may not be the thing that we are feeling the pain in and that we're most motivated to change. And so He says, in essence, cooperate with God. Don't let the fact that God didn't seem to help you win that battle destroy you. Get up again and let God meet the need God wants to meet. That need in this case might be just teaching you the importance of always getting up again, or it might be teaching you to not evaluate how you're doing on your performance and not depending on yourself in that way on your own evaluation. That's the idea. Let's begin to bring this to a conclusion. Part one, as we think about change and the life change that we want to experience, that truly healthy change, where we're not just trading one problem for a different problem, right? Fix this, but now we got a pride problem instead because we're so exceedingly proud of the fact that we beat our whatever problem, right? Not that kind of change. We want life change that's healthy and truly life-giving. That kind of change starts with God. And that is a very good thing. It's a good thing that God is overseeing the change process for me because He knows what I need. He knows which changes are going to make the biggest impact. He knows the order in which the changes should be made, like this one, then that one, then that one. He knows how fast I can change. He knows what supporting structures I need. He knows me. And that's why it's so awesome that He is the one who is overseeing the life change, because He has no blind spots when it comes to me, but He loves me. As we wrap up each part in this little series, I'm not going to be subtle about what I'm hoping that I will walk away with and what I'm hoping you're going to walk away with. My intention is to end each part with a slide in which I say, this is what I'm hoping that we will know, this is what I'm hoping we're going to do, and this is what I'm hoping you and I will feel. So with that said, let's wrap up part one. At the end of part one, I'm hoping you and I will know that God determines what needs to change. God determines that, and He's never nitpicky, and He's never shallow. He's going after the stuff that's going to make a real difference in my healing, my freedom, and in His glory and His kingdom. What do I hope that we will do? I'm hoping that you and I, as we reflect on that quality of God and his action in our life. I'm hoping that we will rejoice in the fact that God knows us and he's in control of the process. And so we can relax a bit, but we can also rejoice and say, wow, God, it's so good that you've got this. And my hope is that not only will we think that, like it's so good that God's in charge, that we'll actually tell him so. That sometime today or this week, we'll actually just pause and say, God, I'm so glad that you are in charge of the change process. Because I've tried to be in charge of my change process many, many, many times, and that hasn't gone so well. So I'm really, really glad that you are in charge of that. And I look forward to cooperating with you, God, on whatever change it is that you want to be making in my life. What am I hoping that we'll feel? I'm hoping that as we reflect on these things, we will feel known. And we'll feel loved. Remember, I said one of the things that's so awesome about God is he loves us as we are, but he refuses to leave us as we are. And I'm hoping that we'll feel that. Not just know it up here, but we'll really feel it, because I think that's a key to having the ability and the courage to trust God and to fully cooperate with God as he takes us around the circle, because chances are some of the stuff that he's going to take us through is going to be kind of painful. And our temptation will be to jump off the circle, to highly value relief. It's like, I got to get out of this. But if we know that we're known and we know that we're loved and we're convinced, it's a conviction, and we even feel it, that we will say, all right, God, I trust you. I trust you. Take me around. Help me to stay on the circle. Let's meet this need. Friends, we will pick up here in part 2.